everyone, I'm Caitlin Teeter, and on today's Teeter Tales, I'm going to be doing a review of Watership Down by Richard Adams. Watership Down is one of my favorite books. It's amazing. You should all read it. That's the end of the review. I'm kidding, but I really do love this book, so I'm going to be very positive about it in this review. I won't be going into spoilers, and you can find chapters in the description to find specific parts of the review. Let's get started. Watership Down begins with a pair of rabbits, brothers Hazel and Fiver, living in a full warren in the English countryside. After Fiver begins having visions of doom coming upon the warren, Hazel decides it's time to leave with any rabbits who will join them. The book then follows the journey of these rabbits as they go out on a search for a new home. Watership Down is a beautifully written book. Adams spends a lot of time describing nature and scenery, but it all feels inherent to the heart of the book, and is very well executed. And I'll read an example of this from the book. In this passage, Adams is describing moonlight over the downs. We take daylight for granted, but moonlight is another matter. It is inconstant. The full moon wanes and returns again. Clouds may obscure it to an extent to which they cannot obscure daylight. Water is necessary to us, but a waterfall is not. Where it is to be found, it is something extra, a beautiful ornament. We need daylight, and to that extent it is utilitarian, but moonlight we do not need. When it comes, it serves no necessity. It transforms. We do not take moonlight for granted. It is like snow, or like the dew on a July morning. It does not reveal, but changes what it covers. And its low intensity, so much lower than that of daylight, makes us conscious that it is something added to the down, to give it, for only a little time, a singular and marvelous quality that we should admire while we can, for soon it will be gone again. There are lots of beautiful descriptions like that throughout the book that really elevate the prose to another level, almost to a poetic extent. Not only this, but Adams is able to capture so many different emotions and scenes throughout the book. Sometimes he'll have scenes where the characters are bantering together, and I found myself genuinely laughing because it was so funny. And other times he captures a terror and makes the rabbit's fear palpable to the reader. Watership Down has a bit of everything. It has wonder, terror, sorrow, triumph, and it all blends together very well into a fantastic epic of a novel. Another unique element that I would like to mention is that each chapter begins with a quote either from literature, important figures, or history that really add to the book. For example, you might have a quote from Shakespeare, the Bible, or Plato, and it will tie into the chapter that follows. Even though the characters in this book are rabbits, Adams makes them all unique and worthy of heroes of an epic tale. There are many characters to like: Hazel, Fiver, Blackberry, Bigwig, Dandelion, and many more that each are contenders for a favorite character. I've gone through Watership Down twice now, and both times I've had a different favorite, because there are so many greats to pick from. I'll also mention the villain, or the closest thing the book has to a villain, General Woundwort. When I was a kid, which was the first time I went through this book, Woundwort was terrifying. Rereading the book, he's still a very menacing figure and stands above all the rabbits, but he's more intriguing than terrifying. Woundwort is a more complex character than I think I originally understood when I went through this book as a child. Watership Down is split into 4 sections, and each of those sections kind of has its own plot. There are clear divides between each of the sections, though it is still one overall storyline. The book never feels too long or stretched out, even though it is a very lengthy book, almost 500 pages with small print. Adams spends a lot of time describing things or gives a lot of scenes of rabbits lounging in burrows, but each of these moments has its place within the overall narrative. The only points where I feel the book slows a bit is when the rabbits tell stories of El Ahra, the central figure of rabbit folklore. These chapters are still interesting and engaging, but because I was so invested in the stories of Hazel and all the other rabbits, I really just wanted to get back to them and get past the rabbit folklore stories. Adams manages to make even the most mundane activities seem exciting. Rabbits sneaking onto a farm to hide in a bean patch can seem very daring, and crossing a small river suddenly becomes a near insurmountable challenge. Ironically, Adams has a chapter titled Deus Ex Machina, and that term is often associated with kind of cheap, lazy storytelling. But the chapter he applies it to actually feels like a payoff and culmination for many different elements throughout the story. Many people would label Watership Down as a fantasy novel, and while I'm torn over this designation, I do think that the book warrants talking about its world building. Adams tries to stick very closely to how real rabbits behave and act and think. And while there obviously needs to be some personification for them in the story, they are far more animal than human. The rabbits are primarily focused on survival and reproduction, the driving forces of real world animals, and that makes Watership Down stand out. Adams uses that animal perspective to transform the English countryside into a completely new place. Suddenly, humans and their devices seem confusing and terrifying, and a simple house cat or dog is now a monster that has to be avoided at all costs. Though not a full language, Adams does create words for Lapine, the fictional language that the rabbits speak within the story. Words that humans have no need for, such as silflay, to eat above ground, exist in the rabbit vocabulary, and some familiar objects to us, such as cars, have their own rabbit words like hroodadoos. This makes the rabbits feel like they do genuinely have their own culture, along with having their own folklore and perceptions of death and natural phenomena that make this whole book feel very fleshed out and almost real. Watership Down is frequently labeled as a children's book, and I disagree with that assessment. Though I admittedly listened to this audiobook when I was a kid, and like many other children, I loved it, I also know many others who found this book pretty terrifying as a kid, and I think that you should consider carefully if this is a book for yourself to read or kids to read. The main concern for this book is the violence. Adams does not shy away from the brutality of nature, and rabbits often die in cruel and bloody ways. They can be poisoned, snared, shot, mauled, eaten, and that's just some of the ways they die. Bloody wounds on rabbits are often described, and though he doesn't go into too much gory and grisly detail, that is something you're going to have to deal with if you read this book. Some may find the ways humans treat rabbits upsetting in the book. One rabbit notes that there's terrible evil in the world, to which another responds, "It comes from men. Men will never rest till they have spoiled the earth and destroyed the animals." Indeed, that sentiment is proven true throughout the book with only a few exceptions. There are also moments and discussions that can be disturbing. An overcrowded warren has does reabsorbing their unborn litters back into their bodies, causing the females to become depressed. And some rabbits will end up dragging themselves away with their injuries to die. There's also some language to contend with in the book. Specifically, the D word is used a couple of times by the rabbits, and very frequently by Kihar. There is, by necessity, sexual content in this book, as the rabbits are very concerned with reproducing. Much of the plot later in the book is actually driven by wanting to find and procure mates. No actual scenes are ever described, but male rabbits will frequently discuss choosing a mate, competing over mates, or feeling the urge to produce offspring. There's also a point at which a female rabbit mistakenly thinks that a male rabbit has called her off to the side so that he can mate with her. There's no drug or alcohol content, as the main characters are rabbits, but I will point out that men are usually observed smoking cigarettes by the rabbits. I feel I should mention that Watership Down was published in the 70s, and as such it has some outdated language. Though it doesn't come up frequently, there are comments made particularly about race that can be a bit uncomfortable, though again they're not frequent and they are not the focus of the story. Some also might be frustrated at how the female rabbits in the story come across as less personified as the males and generally inferior to them, with only a few exceptions to this rule. Watership Down is one of my all-time favorite books, and rereading it as an adult, it fully lived up to my memories of it. Adams created a rich story which feels at once real and fantastic, and by the end of the book, it makes the reader feel like you've gone on an epic journey with these characters who are all rabbits. Like I mentioned, I listened to the audiobook when I first went through this, so if you prefer to listen to it, it has a very good audiobook. I would highly recommend this book to anyone who wants a fantastic novel about leadership, perseverance, and camaraderie. I hope that my review is helpful and that it may have persuaded you to give Watership Down a try. Bye!